Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
People often ask me, what's the most important thing you can tell somebody? What have you learned from your 28 years of practicing law in this state of Michigan? What kind of advice could you give the average person that would do the most good? And it's boiled down to one thing. Don't sell a car to a relative. Don't. Now, before people knee-jerk think of the one time they did that and it worked out, understand that you can if you want to. But I'm going to tell you right now the things that can go wrong that you should consider before you sell a car to a relative. Or conversely, before you buy a car from a relative. And this is kind of like my video, Don't Buy an RV. I understand people are going to buy RVs and people are going to say, Steve, I listened to what you said, I still bought an RV. At least if you listen to what I said, you're going in with your eyes open. So I'm going to tell you right now about all the things that can go wrong selling a car to a relative, why you should rethink this, reconsider this, and if you do it, understand what pitfalls you might encounter. So the first thing I'm going to tell you about buying or selling a car between people who know each other is what happens when it breaks down, okay? So let's suppose I've got a vehicle. I've got a 2002 Ford Explorer. It's got about 150,000 miles on it. I've been driving this thing flawlessly, okay, for years. Thing runs great. And by the way, it does. I still have it. That's why I haven't sold it, even though I've got another Explorer. So let's suppose you came along and you gave me some sob story, and you're a relative of mine, and you say, Steve, I really need a car. And I say, you know something? I got an extra car. I'll sell it to you. So I sell you the car. What's the first thing that happens when that car breaks down? When you bought the car from me and you're my relative, is it going to end well? The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to go, I wonder if he knew. You know, I bet he knew. He drove this car quite a bit, even though he still had that brand new Explorer. He must have known this car's about to break down. I got ripped off. So if nothing else happens, just the breakdown is going to cause some failure, some diminution in the feelings you have towards each other. You are not going to say, you know, that's the brakes. I guess I'll live with it. I'll pay that expensive transmission repair out of my own pocket and be happy about it. No. The back of your mind, you're going to say at the very least, I wonder if he knew. But second of all, keep in mind that anytime you sell a vehicle to somebody, you're selling it to them as is, which means that legally, once I sell it to you, it's yours. It's yours. It came with no implied warranty merchantability. I made no promises about how well it would run. I never said, bring it back, I'll fix it. I gave you what I thought was a good price. You bought the car, you drove off, and the transmission blew up. Okay? So the question is, now what happens if you decide that, you know something, I've been thinking about this. I bet he knew the car had a problem. Are you going to come back now and sue me? Are you going to come back and demand money? And I'm here to tell you, I've had that phone call before where someone called me and said, I bought a car from my sibling, cousin, nephew, uncle, aunt. People buy and sell cars amongst family members. I've gotten the phone call from somebody who said, I bought the car from them. I'm convinced they knew it was bad. It blew up on me, and now I want to know, can I sue them? Now, the good news for you is I tell them, no, you can't. You bought the car as is. You bought it in Michigan, used from an individual who's not a licensed car dealer. No, you can't sue them. But the fact that your relative's making that phone call should cause you some concern. Do you want your relative somewhere down the road making the phone call to an attorney going, hey, can I sue this person? They sold me a defective car. So that's the first problem. What happens if the car blows up? And I'm telling you right now, I've had people tell me that total strangers come back and say, hey, the car blew up, I want some money back. Do you think they're going to be less inclined or more inclined to make that phone call when you're a relative? They're more likely to call you up and say, hey, look, transmission just blew up, scattered, as they say. Obviously, I overpaid for the car now. Can I have some of that money back so I can get a new transmission? And that's not a phone call you can make to a used car dealer. It's not a phone call you could make to a stranger as easily as you can make it to a relative. And that's the problem, is that they'll feel very comfortable making that phone call going, I want my money back, or some of it back. And by the way, I've actually also heard of families where future family reunions were screwed up. People wouldn't talk to each other, or people wouldn't show up. I'm not making this stuff up, my friends. These are just true stories and things that I've seen in 28 years of practicing law in this field. The number two problem that comes with selling a car to a relative. The number one problem, what if it blows up? Number two problem, price. Price, okay? So I've got the car. You approach me and say, hey, Steve, Uncle Steve, Brother Steve, whatever you want to call me. You go, hey, you got that '02 Ford Explorer in there. That thing runs good, right? What do you want for it? Now, can I negotiate with you the same way I can negotiate with a stranger? Because I put the car at the end of my driveway with a for sale sign in the window and a stranger walks by and goes, I want to buy this vehicle. Okay? I can hardball with them. I can negotiate with them, and I can actually, I'm like George Costanza. I can walk. They can walk. Okay? Am I going to do that to a relative? Really? Most people won't. Most people feel inclined to go, you know something? I really wanted 6 for it, but I'm going to sell it to them for 5. It's my cousin, it's my brother, it's my sister, it's my aunt, my uncle, whatever. And now here's the problem. Because you can't negotiate, you're going to kind of get stuck paying them what everybody kind of thinks is fair, okay? And I know what you're saying here too. You're going to say, well, Steve, that's not how I am. I'll get a good price, and if they don't want to pay that price, then I won't sell it to them. Yeah, that might be true for some people. Other people, I assure you, will say, you know something? Somebody looked up a price, they found a price, and said, this is a good, fair price. Next thing you know, everyone's leaning on me to sell it to them for this fair price. Okay? Well, that's a thing. Okay? You can't negotiate in an arm's length transaction with a relative the way you can with a stranger. Again, if you think that if the car blows up down the road, they won't get mad at you, and you think they're going to give you a fair price for the car, even though they're relative, go ahead and do these things. Go ahead and do these things. But remember, there's a very good chance that if they wanted to negotiate the price and you wouldn't negotiate with them the way they wanted you to, deep down they're going, you know something? Uncle Bob sold me the car, but he ripped me off. He ripped me off. Especially when that transmission blows up a little while down the road. So these things will compound each other. Remember, one of the great things about selling a used car, whether you trade it in at a dealership or you sell it in an arm's length transaction and kiss it goodbye, is it's out of your life. It's gone. I've heard many times from people who told me that they sold a car to a relative and the story followed them. Because every time there's a family get together, oh yeah, I had to drop another transmission in the car, I had to rebuild the engine, I had to replace the carburetor. That's what the cars are selling these days, the carburetors, but you know what I'm talking about. So that thing might be lurking out there somewhere, that used car you sold to a relative, and that can happen as well. One other thing, and this is a common one. It's a common one. I've had people tell me that they sold a car to a relative, and because it was a relative, they trusted the relative to pay them later. Now, it's true. You would never trust a stranger to pay you later. But a relative who comes to you with a sob story and says, I can't afford it, but I need it for my job. Can I, let me have the car now and I'll pay you later. We'll sign up a contract. I'll sign a contract. Okay. They agree to pay the note later. What happens if they don't pay it? Are you going to sue them? What happens at the next family reunion when they show up and they're wearing really nice clothes and jewelry they just bought, but they haven't paid you the money they owe you for the car? Again, you going to sue them? Are you going to lean on them? You know, break some kneecaps? What can you do with a relative who owes you money and is pretending they don't owe you any money? Okay, so that's a problem. Also, I've had people tell me, they said, well, they promised to make payments, and they actually made the first few payments. Now they're not making payments anymore. And every time I talk to them, it's another sob story. Oh my gosh, I had problems, but I had to buy, medicine for my grandmother, Couldn't let her die, could we, just to make your $100 payment? So you will hear sob stories, and again, because you're a relative, the amount of sobbing they can do that they expect you to absorb is going to be larger than it would be with a stranger, who, by the way, I would never advise you to sell a car on payments to. It's happened. It's happened. One other thing that I have to tell you is I've also heard of people who sold vehicles to relatives, and they thought, well, it's a relative. I don't have to be so worried about them retitling the vehicle in their own name. And I've done videos on this, the horrors of vehicles that get sold but not properly retitled. I know some states allow you to go online and indicate that you've sold a vehicle to somebody, okay? And of course, the other person who bought it doesn't go online, what happens then? But don't worry about that. Probably won't happen to you. But let's suppose you're in a state where you're supposed to go into the Secretary of State's office or the DMV in person and transfer the title, but you didn't do it because it's your nephew, it's your cousin. You trust them. You trust they'll do the right thing. And they're driving down the road a day or two later, and they get in a car accident, run a red light, kill a couple nuns and a busload of puppies. And now there's a monstrous lawsuit that's being filed. And under Michigan law and many states, The owner of the vehicle is liable for the damages. And you say, well, Steve, that's okay. The cousin bought the car, right? Do they own the car? See, the problem is that the title is evidence of ownership. And the last title on record at the Secretary of State's office has your name on it because your cousin didn't retitle it because you trusted him to do the right thing. And there's nothing wrong with going up to a total stranger and saying, I don't know you. We have to go to the Secretary of State's office together and retitle the car. But when it comes to your cousin, nephew, niece, uncle, brother, sister, whatever it is, you can't say, I don't trust you to do the right thing. You have to go, oh, okay, you'll get that retitled next week when your busy schedule calms down. Okay, sure. Bad things happen. Now, one other thing I have to talk to you about this is that people say, Steve, if I sell the car to a relative and they can't afford to pay for it, but they promise to make payments, can't I repossess the car if they fail to make payments? And I'd say, yes, you can, assuming you did all the paperwork that you normally do when you lend money or borrow money to buy a car. And it's called a purchase money security interest. And there's obviously a contract that goes along with that describes the collateral and the loan and all that stuff. But do you really have that kind of paperwork laying around? And I'm going to tell you right now, and I've mentioned this story before. I had a client once who sold a car to someone he was related to by marriage. And when the marriage fell apart, the person he's related to says, I'm no longer related to that guy because of the fact he divorced the woman. Therefore, I'm going to stop making payments to him. And this guy comes to my office and he tells me this sad story. And I said, oh, that's too bad. And he goes, well, let me ask you this. He goes, I've got paperwork. And he actually had a loan contract and he put his name as a lien holder on the title. And he actually had done all of the documents himself. It's the only time I've seen somebody who did it by themselves and they did it properly. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Never seen this before. It's like a guy saying, yeah, I built a small nuclear reactor in my backyard and it works. You're like, what? I'm half expected that to happen before I saw somebody properly do the purchase money security interest properly. And that held up in court. So it's hypothetically possible, but it never happens. And so the idea that you give somebody a car in exchange for them promising to pay you money and they don't pay the money to you, well, they owe you money. That is a loan. They owe you money. It's a debt. But the debt isn't attached to the vehicle because under most state laws, including Michigan's Article 9 of the UCC, says that to create that security interest, you got to file a bunch of paperwork with Lansing, which no one does, except for my client. Like I said, 1 in a million does not disprove my general theory. So what I'm going to tell you right now is don't think you can go and repossess the car later because you probably can't if all you've got is a handshake and a promise to pay. They owe you money. And that leaves you in a position of what can you do to get someone to pay you money when they're a relative? Are you going to sue them? Or are you going to lean on them at the next family reunion? Or are you going to make them sit at the kids' table on Thanksgiving? These things are all possibilities, but again, it gets ugly. So how do you enforce that loan promise? Because the car probably doesn't work as collateral in that situation. One of the other things I have to tell you about, and this is a related topic, is there are so many things that go wrong when you sell a car to a relative or buy a car from a relative for that matter. These things all work conversely. I buy a car from you, okay, and I think I'm getting a great deal. Then I discover that you actually overcharged me, but I didn't feel like negotiating with you because we're a relative. We're related, right? So that happens that way also. I buy a car from you and the engine explodes. Now I wonder, would my uncle really do that to me? So it can cause bad feelings on both sides, not just on the car seller's side, but on the car buyer's side. But one of the other things I have to tell you, it's related, is a number of times I had people call me and they say, Steve, I co-signed a loan. And I think I may have done an entire video on this, but this is related. And they'll say, somebody in my family, or heaven forbid, a roommate, somebody I'm not even related to, I've had that happen too, where somebody goes, I had a friend who went to get a loan. And he couldn't get the loan. He has bad credit for some wacky reason. And he needed a car. And he brought me to the car dealership. And the car dealer said, yeah, if you sign here, he can get this car. So I signed. And he got a car, which he stopped making payments on. Right around the time he stopped talking to me and taking my phone calls. And now I'm getting phone calls from a bank. And I know where the car is. I know where he is. He just ain't making payments. And I tell people, I say, you got to read what you sign. Because in most states, when you co-sign a loan, you say, I am agreeing to become the, in essence, primary borrower here for the purposes of the bank's collection efforts. So the bank wants to collect money. They don't have to go after the other person first. They can go after you first. If they can't find the collateral, they can skip that altogether, just go after you. And it's like, what? So be very, very careful co-signing a loan, whether for a relative or a friend or a stranger, for anybody, But those things can cause hardships also. In reality, what we're talking about here is a variety of contractual relationships, okay? Whether it's to buy or sell a car, or to loan money on a car, or to help somebody get a loan. Anytime you get into some kind of contractual relationship with a relative, okay, you run the risk of these sorts of things happening. And so when it comes to a used car, you're going to sell a used car or buy a used car, between relatives, I would urge you not to do it unless you are willing and able to accept the ramifications. And the ramifications might be that the person you sell it to is going to get mad at you when the engine blows up, or the person that you sell it to is going to get mad at you thinking you overcharged them. Or you might get mad at yourself saying, I undercharged them because I couldn't charge them as much as I really wanted to because they're a relative. Or someone comes to you and says, will you co-sign a loan? You have to say, I'm really sorry, I can't. Unless you're willing to actually be on the hook for the entire loan amount and understand that they might come one day to collect it from you. You're happy with that? Go ahead and sign. Sign like John Hancock with a huge signature to let the bank know that's the target, guys. Come and get me. But my advice to you, like I said, I've been doing this for 28 years, talk to people disgruntled on the phone almost daily. And I'm not saying I get this phone call daily, but I get it often enough. I get the phone calls from people, the emails from people, the comments from people who say, Steve, bought or sold a car to or from a relative, and it's been ugly ever since. And it happens. So there you go. Don't sell a car to a relative unless you want to live dangerously. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Lehto's Law. And no, I'm not a robot.